You weren't initially sold on Actionstep, concerned that legal tech might be slightly boring. So what actually changed your mind?
I got to, spend my time figuring out how to move the chess pieces on the board to beat the competition, and that was really what drives me. I didn't get to play baseball or figure out how to get to the World Series. I got to figure out how to win in the market.
In your time at Actionstep alone, it has jumped from 80 to 225 employees.
Mm-hmm. It was nuts how much growth they fueled.
And you worked with some big names in legal tech, including Dave Duffield, the founder of PeopleSoft and Workday. What did you learn from working with him?
If you do things superficially, you struggle, and if you really think deeply about it, you can solve the problem in a much more elegant way, in a simple way.
Today's episode is sponsored by VXT, the phone system built for law firms. VXT integrates with practice management systems so that when lawyers make calls, their billable time and legal advice can be saved in the right place automatically. 20% of billable time goes unrecorded. A lot of that is phone calls that get forgotten about. Get some of those billables back using VXT. Go to vxt.co.nz or click the link in the description to find out more.
Welcome to another episode of the File Notes podcast. Today we're joined by Early Stevens, CEO of Actionstep. Early, take us back to what it was like growing up, and where did you grow up?
Well, what was it like growing up? I grew up in a town called Kalamazoo, Michigan, and it's halfway between Detroit and Chicago, so a college town, basically. And so college towns have a unique vibe about them because there's always this an abnormal, set of young people there that you sort of think that's life. And so there's this sort of a current of fun and a little partying and, anything's possible. So it was a neat town. I had a big family, 7 siblings. Huh? So yeah, it was kind of on my own really as what I wanted to do. So it wasn't really very scripted, I guess I would say. So yeah, I had a pretty normal childhood, did the normal things and just kind of made my own way.
How many people lived in this town?
In this town, in the general area, it's like 180,000 people.
Nice.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And were you a sporty kid, academic kid?
Well, I kind of downplayed the academics because I preferred sports, and so literally, 100% was a sporty kid. That's really what I wanted to do. I'd get home from school, forget the homework, I was outside.
Nice.
Yeah.
What was your sport of choice?
My sport of choice was baseball.
Nice.
Mm-hmm.
And is it still the sport you follow today, or?
That's my number one sport. It's hard to not follow American football. It's just the epic battle if you're into it. I mean, it's such an intricate game, and it's almost like war. It's so brutal, and there's so much to it. But baseball is such a cerebral game, and you play a whole game for 3 hours, and one moment decides it. And so it's such an interesting thing, the strategy and being ready at that moment. I mean, that's kind of the cool thing about that. So yeah.
Who's your baseball team and football team that you follow?
Detroit Tigers and Detroit Lions. And if anybody was following American football, the last couple of years have been the Lions' years. So it's fun to watch them. They were the laughing stock of the league for the last 60 years, and now they've got some swagger, and it's fun to finally be a fan.
We love a comeback from a team.
Yeah. And
when you were younger, did you have a dream of what you wanted to be when you were older?
100%. I wanted to be a professional baseball player. That's all I ever really wanted to be. So then that obviously didn't happen. So I guess I went into software instead.
Yeah, so you went on to study both computer science and marketing. Quite an interesting combo, kind of contrasting. What led you to studying both of those things?
Well, interestingly, I did a little programming in high school, for a year, because we got this Altair computer that was one of the first sort of small computers, and we just sort of went in there and started messing around with it, myself and a few other kids, and I wrote some little, some stupid little programs, and it was fun. I kind of thought it was a little bit of logic puzzle problems and enjoyed it, but I was always going to go to school for business because I really didn't, I wasn't somebody that loves the math and science stuff. If you're not drawn to it, you're not drawn to it. I can't make myself, be interested in it. But so I was going to school for marketing, and my brother just happened to be in a passing conversation, mentioned that he was told by a recruiter, and if you had a minor in computer science right now with your marketing major, you'd have so many opportunities. And I'm like, that seems like a good idea, because I kind of enjoyed that. I thought the classwork would be relatively easy, and I'd come out at a time when computers were, and automation was really taking root. So that's it. It was just him saying something to me and me listening and taking note.
And did that make you a lot more employable when you left?
100% did, yeah. And, I would have, when I first got out of school, I would have gone either way. I would have gone, I interviewed for both types of jobs. I just happened to land in a technical programming field first. It was a different time, when I came out of college. It's a little different than what it had been more in recent years, just in terms of, you really sort of looked for your job, as opposed to, we got to a point where it's like we were begging people to come and work for you because we had sort of a shortage there. That was a time when it wasn't so such an easy thing to get a job. So it's like, well, for me, it's kind of cool. I had 2 lanes I could go in. Most people had 1.
Yeah. If you were to go down that marketing lane, or when you were studying marketing, what part of marketing did you enjoy? I feel like as a marketer, there's events, there's digital media, there's...
It's always the strategy and consumer behavior. What do people want? That's, to me, always what's going to work. And, I think I have a pretty good sense of that. That will work and people will really like that. I have sort of a good intuition of that. And so that's always, so that to me, it's always been the strategic marketing strategy. My favorite courses were, in that area.
Nice.
Yeah.
And so your first role out of uni was actually in legal tech, and you haven't been in legal tech your whole life, but you were programming software in a courtroom. For courts, sorry. Did that make you want to stay in technology and programming, or was there a marketer inside you that still wanted to say, let me out?
Yeah, there's really more of an innovator. That was a small company, and it was, I did a lot of innovation there because it was sort of a curmudgeonly business, and so everyone sort of just did what they told in the basics. And I'm like, oh, we can add these kinds of features to the software, and everyone's like, oh my gosh, I didn't know we could do that. So I had an opportunity to uplift all the teams of all the products. We had probably 10 or 12 product lines at the time in that business. So I liked that innovation piece of it. And then because it's a small company, I got sent on the road to go do customer support and install. And I just enjoyed being out. You go to a conference, with a lot of legal tech conference. Well, that industry has a lot as well. And just being with the people and talking about, hey man, if we could do this, all of that, it is still that same sort of consumer behavior. What do people need the software to do? And so that's really where I always gravitated to it. Less let me code it. Once I know what I need to do, the actually coding it is a little tedious for me.
And so what was the actual products that you were working on? Can you share
that product is a whole judicial suite called Gavel, which actually was an acronym. It's spelled Gavel. But I started out on child support and enforcement, which is payroll every day, highly regulated, and case management, and all the stuff that you deal with on that side. It was a full subsidiary, AR, legal accounting, court accounting. It was court accounting at the time. So it was a really interesting primer for me just getting started, because it was a system of record, and you can't, those systems have to work every day, particularly if you're cutting checks for moms every day. That can't go down, you know what I mean? So it's just the necessity and the need for that to be up and running and reliable. It was very, it was a very lesson learning sort of event for me, or process for me.
Yeah, I assume that would impact the way you build things and the way you operate as a business, which is probably very similar to Actionstep.
100%.
Now.
Yeah.
And so your next career move after that was back to the university where you studied, and you were there for 8 years modernizing their software. What were some of the biggest technological shifts that you saw during your time there?
Well, for me at that time, it was really migrating off of the mainframe, everything onto client server, and that you think in the U.S., universities are a little behind in tech. Most of the public sector tends to lag a little bit just because they don't sort of spend the dollars in advance, if you will. But we had some really, really innovative people running the university. We went from 18,000 students to 28,000 students in the period of time that I was there. A lot of really, growth. They've added a medical college and everything. So it's a big, large Division I university. And so all of that mainframe shift down in decentralization and really giving the departments the ability to solve their own problems. That was the number one thing that we were doing there, other than, oh, I got to wait for IT to do something and it'll run tonight. And then if it breaks, so I saw that shift. But I also felt that I was pretty fortunate to have worked in the mainframe environment for just tangentially, because it has all the things you have as a SaaS business. You have to have 24/7 unattended operations. Things have to work and be resilient. And people who started more in the sort of, PC, smaller computer world in that, client server generation, just didn't have that sort of hardened mentality. You don't really get that even in school, I don't think, as a general rule. So I feel, when it really things went back to the web and SaaS and whatnot, it's really sort of a back to the future sort of thing for me. It's like all those principles that I learned and took away from that were super relevant again. So it's kind of, it was a good training ground for me.
And you worked with some big names in legal tech, and I think this was during this time, including Dave Duffield, the founder of PeopleSoft and Workday. What did you learn from working with him?
Well, so his team, when we started working, they were 50 to 75 people when we started working with them, and we were the first organization to actually close the fiscal year in PeopleSoft General Ledger. It's a long story behind that, but just so you go to conferences when they're that tight knit and you're working with some of the smartest people in the world, and I was struck by he's a brilliant guy. He always would joke that he was a comedian trapped in a software executive's body. He was just a nice guy, but a very humble guy, and his people really loved him. It was just the culture to me that I took away. It's like, that's a guy who's taking care of his people and he's supporting his people and he's also doing the right things and he's smart. I just thought it was a good person to emulate. A lot of times you think you see a lot of the big tech mavens are really hard charging and tough, and I think the way he handled that business, it was pretty brilliant. And they doubled every single year till they got to a couple billion and sold to Oracle. It was that was a really cool thing for me to see. And I got lucky to because we were at university, we were literally in debates, and some of their sort of thought leaders sitting and talking with us, what is a fund? Is it an account? Because you do fund accounting in public sector, and we finally just understood that a fund is a fund, and so it was an interesting conversation to see those people that had actually launched such innovative products were still struggling with some really weird dynamic like that, and it gave me. It gave me a sense of the deep intellectual thinking you have to do. If you do things superficially, you struggle. And if you really think deeply about it, you can solve the problem in a much more elegant way, in a simple way.
Yeah, that deep intellectual thinking is something I recognize in a lot of great founders, and they just are on another level to how everyone else thinks. Even when I think of Luke Campbell, CEO of VXT, the way he thinks about things, like you go to him with something, say I think like this, and he gives this big, deep and thinking about it. I'm like, wow.
Yeah. And then if you can do that and then fundamentally boil it down to something simple.
Yeah.
Like
simplicity is so important.
In legal tech, we captured time that lawyers work on documents for clients. That's the simplicity of some of it. And if you can get it to, do the thinking and again boil it down to the simple, then you probably have it right.
Yeah, and so you mentioned there were some things that you took away from Dave's leadership style, like the culture and that being super important. Was there any practical parts that you've now applied in your own leadership that you might have applied to culture or?
I basically try to really, really listen to my people. I don't just do what they say, but across the organization, I listen. And if you have an organization that is not a good listening organization, I think that's not a good culture. But it's also, they're probably missing a lot. So I try to build that culture, and it doesn't really matter who I'm talking to, the newest person that's in the entry level or one of my direct reports. When they're talking, I'm really trying to listen for what I may not know, and because I always think, I know everything except for what I don't know. And you have to be open to that or you miss a lot. So I just think that's probably the number one thing I really try to, it doesn't really matter. And you learn when you do that who your really good people are. If you just listen and ask them questions, you start to say, wow, that person is really, really good, right? So
yeah. What's the main way that you do get feedback or opportunities to listen to people that might not be your direct reports? Because I know Actionstep has many staff.
Yeah, it's harder in this world where there's a lot of remote working. I usually just chit-chat with people, right?
Yeah.
You just walk the halls. But I try to get out and go places. I visit this office. I'm going to go to our Brisbane office next week and just sort of get amongst the people as much as I can, sort of just have a little, conversation here or there. But a lot of it is listening to what the people you do talk to have to say about their conversation. So I listen to what they're gleaning. And is there something you've been told that you're relaying to me that you're not really hearing? And then, we have a lot of meetings with a lot of people on it. And I'll reach out sometimes and just ping somebody that could be really at any level in the company and ask, hey, you got a couple minutes? I want to run something by you. So I do a little bit of that, and I'd like to do more of it. It's I would do a lot more of it. I had more hours in the day of it.
And so kind of moving on to your next role, when we previously spoke, you said that the next role you moved into was when Y2K was a big concern. And what was this actually about? Because at the time, I thought this was, oh no, 2000s are coming, all the Gen Zs are coming. But turns out this was a computer programming issue.
You missed that completely, huh?
Yeah,
it's been wiped out from the history.
And I was like, oh, it's actually a computer thing with clocks. And I was like, oh.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's funny because, the company I went to work for, it was really to turn it from what was really kind of a hardware value-added reseller into a software business. That's really the mission I took on there, because it was a company that is a publicly traded company. It had been around for a while, but they had, because they were selling hardware, they really would write all these software programs to fit on any kind of hardware so they could sell more hardware. So they had 250 products, and Y2K was just everybody, because storage was so expensive back in the day, everybody used a 2-digit date. And so if 99 is less than 90, if your date is less than that date, when you do date comparisons, it all breaks at 2000, because now 00 is less than 99 instead of greater than, everything breaks, right? So everybody had to change to a 4-digit date. And it was so funny. I mean, people were predicting the end of the world. I'm like, this is not going to be anything. That's what I thought it was relating to. It was so dumb that people panicked to the degree that they did. But you had to do it. You had to do the remediation work. And it was really boring, painful work. But I kind of laughed, because at that company, they had one product that had such dire storage ramifications that it only had a 1-digit year. And so every 10 years they have had to Y2K it of sorts. And it really wasn't that hard in that one system. So we just had to multiply that 250 times over.
Wow.
Yeah.
Did they not think about, was it a storage issue, or did they not think
it was literally
storage 5 years ago?
It was really stupid in retrospect. Everyone's thinking, I don't care. I'm not going to be here in 2000 to worry about it. Because a lot of those programmers that built that stuff were pioneers. They were somebody they were ambitious people, or like to take on challenges. Someone threw a book at them and they read it. Yeah, I'll be a programmer. And so they learned it. Some of them were accidental, and there just wasn't a best practice or any of that stuff. It had to be organically developed, and we created a massive problem in the world because of it.
And so how long are we talking about, how long it took to fix this? Was it you can fix this in a week or a year? Or
it was probably in 18 months. It was a big project. I had one of my people track product by product who's doing it, and it was but everybody did it. The consulting firms made crazy money because they hired a lot of arms and legs at these large organizations to do it. The Fortune 100 firms really they spent a ton of money, and it drove a ton of revenue for probably about 5 years. I would really say the last 5 years of it was just really, really heavy work throughout the world.
Can you explain a little bit about the ramifications of why this is such a big issue when we're talking about all these big pieces of technology? Because
nothing would have worked. People were predicting, my gosh, the software in the little bit of software that's in your car or your airplane, suddenly if the date's wrong, suddenly you don't know what's going to happen. That it was unpredictable results in the code more than anything else, and things breaking and can't get checks out to people. All those things. And so, it wasn't hard work, like I said. It was just a lot of work.
Yeah, so fascinating. Yeah. I'm glad I know what that's referring to.
It's funny to realize that your generation has forgotten about that. And we mostly have all forgotten about it.
I wasn't even born.
No, I know.
And
it's funny.
So as these Y2K worries eased off, you helped the company scale from 10 million to 125 million. What was the main driver of that growth during that period?
Well, it was focused on an area the $10 million was a business unit of about 25 million, and I looked around and said, well, here's company-wide, here's what we're good at, and that's what we should do more of. We know this more than anyone else, so let's focus on this. And we actually divested a few business units and shut down products that weren't core, and we focused on one public sector app around. It was highly regulated, very provincial market, but it was state and local government property assessment and taxation, and we did it globally. But just focusing and really getting to be the best at one thing, that's the lesson there. Like, don't try to do, and then we can add this and this and this, and you do all of it barely good enough. And let's do one thing really well. And so we did that, and then I got to, spend my time figuring out how to move the chess pieces on the board to beat the competition. And that was really what drives me. I didn't get to play baseball where I could, I figure out how to get to the World Series. I got to figure out how to win in the market. And that to me is really the same kind of thing.
Yeah, that focus and being really good at that one thing is super important. Like, I think at VXT, that's why we've had so much growth, because you focus on the legal industry and building a phone system for them rather than salespeople and everybody else. So definitely a lesson to be learned there.
Yeah.
And you took a career break at one point, which I think was super awesome, and you started a cabinetry business and also flipped houses. What led to this?
Well, I have a lot of friends and relatives that were, commercial builders and, and own, glazing companies where they do glass work on skyscrapers. And a good friend of mine was a residential home builder. And we had always said we're going to go into business together. And for a variety of reasons, we didn't. And I was just having lunch with him one day, and I needed to do something different. I'm like, I was kind of a little burned out. I'm ready to try, I just kind of want to do something different. And because of all the work I had done in real estate and appraisal, I understood values of houses and really well, and he knew how to build them. So we just started flipping houses, and the cabinetry business was just me listening to him. Like, it's a good lesson, and he's thought about it later, but it goes back to that same lesson. We were flipping houses, and everybody that does house flipping or house building, one of the worst things of it is the kitchen sources, whatever, the kitchen cabinet suppliers. It takes forever to get them, months of lead time. And then by the time you get them into the house, if they're wrong or they get beat up and banged and nicked or whatever, it's months or, at least 6, 8, 10, 12 weeks to get them replaced until you're always behind. And he was having so much trouble. And he found this different source, and he just kept raving about him. Like, oh my gosh, it's 2 weeks. I can go pick them up tomorrow. And these are great. Like the build quality and whatever. I so good. And I'm like, Sam, you should start a kitchen cabinet store. And he's like, nah, because he really didn't understand it. So one weekend I just went home and put a business model spreadsheet together. I gave him 2 pages. I walked out to the house he was working on, and I said, here. I gave it to him. I said, read this over the weekend. And I came back in on Monday. He goes, all right, you got my attention. And so he wanted to do it. And so we started it. We leased some space, and he got things going. And at that same time, I got recruited to go back to work again. And I remember talking to him like, Sam, I kind of got to go do this because it looks like fun, and they're asking me to do it, and working for a good PE firm at the time, but we still got to do this thing. So I got your back, but you're going to have to do all the work. And he's like, okay. So I think it was a bit of a deer in the headlight for him, but man, unbelievable work job he's done on it, and it's fun to see. And that's sort of maybe the thing I like to do. I always knew he could do that. I don't think he knew he could do that. So yeah, it's been fun to see what he's done with that business. So it's still there. I just every couple of months we sit down and over a cocktail and talk about strategy. But he's ran since the beginning. Yeah,
that's awesome.
Yeah.
And do you think that time away kind of helps your career later on, having that kind of time out and working on something completely different?
Yeah, because I mostly realized that I just don't do well without something to do. I need that challenge. And then, so I'm sitting there making up stupid stuff to do. You know what I mean? Like, why am I doing this?
What did you come up with to do?
Oh, I would I'd buy a lake house and remodel it because I needed something to do. Or I'd I got to go. I literally at one point was thinking, I'm going to go on one of these 6-month cruises and see, I'm like, that's insane. Like, I need a challenge. So that's really what led me to go back and kind of get back in the fray again.
Is it something you'd recommend to others if they're in like a high pressure kind of corporate environment all the time?
I think it's good. I think it's good to decompress a little bit and get some perspective. It took me, several months because I probably stayed at that place longer than it was a slog to get us where we got, and we sold and had a really good outcome in that business. And I stayed around is what I did, and I should have left at that point. And the new buyers just, you have a business that's working, and then somebody buys you and they think well, I know how you guys are doing all this wrong. I'm like, okay, feel free. And they were, they basically kind of ruined the company. But I literally realized at the point where I needed to get out, because you can't have an impact on something when you're just a cog in a wheel. And it's like, well, we don't really care how you do this year because we have 300 business units in this portfolio, and we just need everybody to be around 9%. So yeah, but we have this opportunity. So the individual business, kind of gets lost, and they sort of dumb them down. So, I think if you're in that situation, you should definitely step away. But it was good for me just to have the mental break. Yeah.
Yeah. When you returned after that time off, what business did you go to then?
Company called Infogix, which was Fortune 100, really big companies, really data quality, data governance, and analytics. I mean, we were doing machine learning, AI, all the stuff in various industries. A lot of P&C insurance, a lot of the big sort of retail and food and beverage industries and whatnot. And so it was interesting. It was just a lot of work around data. And so I initially joined to quote, they were having a quote sales issue, and so they wanted to try a new sales leader, and so I joined, and then quickly from there took over as CEO. But it was a data centric business, and again back to that sort of big scale, things have to work at scale, and very interesting space. So.
How did you find that step from being VP of Sales and Business Development to CEO? Was it the first time you were a CEO?
It was the first time I was CEO, but I really always, I was always the sort of the strategic lead everywhere I've ever really been. So it's not much different to a degree. I didn't find it I had a good team. I had to make some, a few changes on the team, but, really if you that's the number one job as CEO, I think, is to build a really strong team of people that work well together. And then your job is just putting up the guardrails and letting them run, as long as the guardrails are on and we're going in the right direction. You kind of unshackle people so they can be their best. That's really my approach to it. So I find it works better for me with my style. So there are better heads of sales than me, let me put it that way. So.
I really like that approach of leadership, of someone who is being led by someone like that, who they just give you the guardrails and very much let you make what you can of it and experiment. I think it's a really good way if you have the right conditions. Yeah,
I mean, you need to trust your people, and you need to set the directions. But if you find people and then are you interested in this area? Well, here's where we want to go, and do you have the experience and the ability to do it? You don't really even have to manage them; they manage themselves. You know what I mean? They come to you for advice, and I've got these choices, or I'm thinking about it this way. That's great. I can coach. I don't have to dictate, and that's my style, is much more coaching related.
And you mentioned about the interest there, and this is something that I was going to say is quite interesting, but using the same word, I feel like there's so many industries in tech where me, for example, I love the legal industry, but am I really interested in phone systems? And so I feel like you've worked in a lot of industries as well, where are you overly passionate about, for example, the data, or overly passionate about property?
Yeah, the interest for me is always figuring out how to win the game. That's always that interest if you're in the leadership position and you have a team that you're in an environment where you're able to do that. Some people are not. I mean, there are organizations where, to be honest with you, when I worked at the university, that's shockingly, it's just not a place where new ideas and innovation go to grow. They pretty much go there to die. And I was given that advice from a couple of people there. Like, there are places where you can be yourself better than here, because you just you hit a wall. So if you have an organization like that, that's the main thing for me.
I think it's that growth part, and you mentioned the chessboard, how can you win? And it's if you might not be passionate about the actual product itself, well, you are passionate about the product because you're building it, but the category of product. But if you're competitive and into win the growth game, I think that's...
And there is a piece to legal tech that, there's some real needs in this space for more, it's the wrong word, more accessible legal services are needed. And so their software can enable that. And there's, I have a son that's in law school, and, I really don't want him spending, the rest of his years like, hating time and, tracking time, all the stuff that they struggle with, finding ways to help them be better service providers and make more money, and also the clients get service for less money. And that's a challenge, and that's a problem that can be solved.
I think it's going to be so interesting the next 10 years about how like a lot of the moves to more fixed fee billing and everything and efficiency savings, how that's going to help access to justice. And there's some really cool business models out there that I've seen that I'm super excited to see more of. And now we kind of get to your role as CEO of Actionstep. You weren't initially sold on Actionstep, concerned that legal tech might be slightly boring, kind of relating to the discussion we just had about interest. So what actually changed your mind?
Really, when talking with, I was working with Sarah Capital, the private equity firm, and really them giving me details on the market and me looking into it and realizing, wow, there's a lot of work to do here, a lot of opportunity, and a lot of good opportunity to be influential in the space. And I really like the part of it is that I really do like, and I really liked it in my one of my prior stints, is the market is such a closed, sort of small knit community. As big as it is, word travels, and I actually like being rewarded for doing good work. I can't, I'm not going to fool anybody and try to get them to buy something that's no good. I tend to really try to sell on, authenticity and honesty is my view there, because then you don't have to really, you're not gaming the system. And so I appreciated that those are the rules in this market. I like that. So, all I have to do is do better work than the other people, and we win.
Nice. And so Actionstep has its early roots in New Zealand, where we are today. Can you share just a brief history of Actionstep's history?
Sure. Yeah, Actionstep was founded by a guy named Ted Jordan here in New Zealand, 15 years ago. And really, he set out to build a product that was really a general purpose business application, not so much a legal tech platform. I mean, and he has this really powerful design fundamental to the product of disconnected workflow and flexibility. And it just happened when he started selling it. It was just tailor-made for, law firms and other legal departments as well. And so he was just, as a typical founder, that he just, kind of just dragged that company to a certain state on his own will. And, he had some really good tech people with him, and he ran around the world, ran around the globe, New Zealand, Australia, the UK, did some early work in the US and did that. Well, then he decided, all right, I need some help scaling this to the next level. And he had brought, some people in, and they had done some early work there. And then Sarah Capital decided to invest in it. And so he had the generation where he was growing it a little bit on his own. Then he partnered with Sarah Capital, and they basically just tried to do a couple of things. A, make sure that we prioritized the U.S. market. It was sort of done prior to Sarah a little bit as an afterthought, through partners, and didn't really have a local presence. And then to, professionalize the leadership of the organization. So since Sarah joined, the company's probably 4 times the size that it was then. It's been a really good growth story, and that's continued today. And I think it's outperformed their expectations maybe, but like they love the business, and they're continuing to just what do you need, whatever you guys need, because we have such a good opportunity and such a great business model.
Yeah, so in your time at Actionstep alone, it has jumped from 80 to 225 employees. Mm-hmm. And I think, how long have you been at Actionstep for?
2.5 years.
So crazy growth, and I think there's plans for that to just continue to increase. What's been key to managing that rapid growth?
Well, really balancing funding the growth and then building the scaffolding for the growth. I think, being a founder-led company, you do things a little bit, everybody's a little bit of everything, and there's certain fundamental, sort of supporting parts of the organization that you don't build purposefully. So it's really been being able to support that growth, because you bring on a lot of people. It's not easy to recruit and hire that many people and manage that. And we have too thin of an HR team, probably too thin of a finance team, because we're trying to balance that. So it's really been balancing the investment in growth, because we could always add more sales and more headcount, but at some point you have to sort of stop and make sure that you're investing in the right area. So it's that. Mm-hmm.
What do you think was like one change or process that you implemented that really helped in that scaling journey?
To really, give accountability across the organization to the people, so it's not shared. You have somebody who's going to own growing the UK market, somebody who's going to own growing North America, instead of everybody trying to do a little bit of everything. And so it's really just organizing the leadership team and the company to be able to support the growth and give them what they need. That's really the change. I think not really rocket science to me.
And so you've mentioned some of the different geographies that Actionstep are in. Is there a particular geography that's like fueling growth the most?
Well, North America, has grown a lot significantly over the past 2 years, but a little bit to our surprise, because when I took over, I was a little bit pessimistic about the UK market, and our head of sales there just did a lot of grassroots work in the market and just local events and literally just grassroots roll up my sleeves and sales and marketing work, and has just built a great reputation, and the product fits well there, and that just has taken off. And so that's a big challenge for us to balance the growth into two geos that are both really having growth opportunities at the same time, having to trade that off with each other.
Do you think what's worked in, say, North America or the UK has been quite different, and like similarly with Australia and New Zealand?
Well, I mean, they're all at different points. I think each market's at a little different point of maturity. I think that's kind of the main thing. The problem set is pretty similar. We got our start in Australia and New Zealand and have much more, sort of market penetration there, market share there. So I don't think there's a trade. I don't think there's a lot of differences, but each market has different people, different players that you integrate with, and different sort of regulations that you have to follow. So it's just that little last mile bit that you can't just sort of superficially do it. You have to, if you're going to go in the UK market, for example, you got to go there, and you have to be there. You have to work with who's also, successful there, and that's different geo by geo. So that's a bit of the complication, but.
And you mentioned before about the importance of word of mouth in an industry. You love industries that have kind of recognition by that. Do you think that particular geographies flourish more with word of mouth? I'm thinking of London, for example, is much more condensed, whereas you think of North America, so big.
Yeah.
Do you think there's different effects there?
I do think that there is. It's harder in the U.S. I mean, I think there are a few firms in the U.S. that spend a crazy amount of money on marketing compared to what we spend. For example, and part of that is because it's so big and the geography is so large. You could start in one, really just New York, and build a beachhead there. There's so much business there. New York area, is probably as big as all of Australia practically. You know what I mean? And so I think there is a challenge in the U.S., but it tends to work. That word of mouth tends to work in many ways. Like, for example, Toronto, we have a lot of customers in Toronto, particularly using our legal accounting solution. That word of mouth just sort of happens. Oh, yeah, we use this. And then it happens in the consulting business, the consulting area, because that's the word of mouth that can go from firm to firm to firm. And yeah, and so in the UK, we've been able to be very concentrated in our outreach and get to people easily. And yeah, you're right, in the US, we have to try to put people where the customers are.
Nice. And you talk a lot about having an amazing team, and I've met lots of the Actionstep team. They're definitely amazing. We work really closely with them. In your experience as a leader, what do you think the secret is to building an awesome company culture that makes people want to stay and is a culture that makes it easy to recruit people?
It's kind of an interesting question. I mean, I think you have to be fair, like be a good decision maker and be fair, like do the right things. A lot of people will not do, if you're making decisions that are sort of arbitrary, then you don't have trust. So I listen to people, I gather the input, and then, we make decisions together, and that, all right, this is what we're going to do. Everybody sign up to it. And people, when you can make the decision or the vision or the plan everybody's idea, then that's really the key. And so I'm trying to be really inclusive. That goes to the listening. And then maybe the most important thing is you have to do the right things by the organization. And it could be almost anything. It could be removing a person that is toxic, Or it could be, we've got to stop doing this because we're breaking all of our customers. If you don't do those things, that's the culture killer to me, because everyone's looking at you like where you're the leader and you're not making these hard decisions. So I think you have to do the hard thing that everybody knows needs to be done. And then you really do build a culture where people trust and they know that they're going to be heard. And if things need to change to improve the business, they know they're going to have an opportunity to do that. That's a great place to be.
Speaking of making hard decisions, what's one of the hardest decisions you've had to make as a leader in your career?
It's always when I have to change out a key leader in the organization. It's really difficult. I try to coach. My job is to bring out the best in people, help them be better than maybe they, thought they could be, help them reach their best potential and whatnot. And so sometimes I'm accused of spending too much time on that. And when you have to make a change, it's really tough because you're on the one hand, it's for the benefit of the organization. The money that comes into the company is really on behalf of our customers. You have to do it for their sake, but you are impacting a human being. And so you try to do it in a way that's the best that you can do to help it be as much of a positive learning experience, but it's really hard. Yeah. I don't like doing it, but you do it.
Yeah. The joys of being a leader, having to make hard decisions like that.
Yeah.
And kind of flipping back to how quickly Actionstep's grown, and I'm sure you wouldn't be involved in much of the hiring, but when you are involved in a job interview, do you have a question that you always like to ask people in the job interview?
My first question really is what do you want to do? That's it, because I'd like to align interest with need and ability. So I just sort of find out. I ask questions about what they're interested in doing, because I do think that's probably the most important thing for me. I like to find out a little bit about them. Can I work with this person, the rapport-wise and whatnot? But that's it. And I use a tool. I tend to use this screening tool called Predictive Index. You'll find me soapboxing that because a lot of positions have certain needs just of how a person's wired. And you don't want to, if you have a bad fit, like you need somebody with a lot of patience and you hire somebody who's impatient, they'll be miserable and vice versa. And so making sure that you're aligning somebody the way they're sort of wired to work in a role that you're asking them, I try to make sure that happens too.
Yeah, a tool like that would be super interesting. Is it similar kind of to do you know, like Myers-Briggs test?
It's a little bit like that, but it's actually, when you look at it, it seems like the dumbest thing, and it can't work, but it is amazing at predicting things that won't work. And so I find organizations that use it, they're like, oh my gosh, it's been shocking, because it really, the best thing you can do is give it to your team and do it team by team, because each person, the way they're wired, has a different communication skill. So you take an introverted person, for example, you need to tell them, hey, I want to talk to you about this. So can we talk about that tomorrow? And if you go on that person and try to barge in, and they're going to be miserable, you're going to be like disgruntled. And so in its best, people will put their profile pattern, which is a very easy thing to understand, like outside their cube, if you will. And so when you go in, hey, this is who I am. I'm a captain, so I'm going to tend to take charge. So let me know if it's really good at breaking down the barriers that are communication related, because people put motive to something that I'm just born this way. I can't help it that I think out loud, for example. Like a lot of people do think out loud. You have to let them do that. Right?
Yeah. So. I love those sorts of like personality tests. I read a book, Surrounded by Idiots, and it's one of my favorite books. And it breaks it up into like colors, which is kind of very similar. It's like the red,
I think I've seen
which
that.
is like captain vibes. And when I was working at Deloitte previously, we had the like wheel up on the wall, and so you pinned yourself at where you were, and you can just see some people who are really talkative and loud, like myself, in like the red yellow kind of area. Then I think it's great to understand your teammates, like you said.
Yeah.
And I asked about the hardest decision you've had to make. What about the thing you're most proud of the Actionstep team and yourself in the past few years?
Well, I mean, there's a lot. I mean, I could really talk about every single geo has done amazingly well. I mean, doing so well competitively, and we made a couple of small acquisitions in Australia, and those resources become, because they come with people that know the space and have been doing it, doing things maybe in a legacy product or whatever, and bringing them into the organization and lifting them into new roles. It's been really, really fun and rewarding. But I think the biggest thing is that we did an acquisition about 15 months ago now of a company based in Canada called Soluno, and it's a really good legal tech and accounting billing system. It didn't really do practice management. Just did the financial piece of it, and it was an area that we were going to do some refactoring and investment in our product, and we got an opportunity because they came on the market, and it was a challenging. I wasn't really initially in favor of it, thinking, this is just going to be more trouble. And then I met the team and looked at, really the momentum. And it was an interesting thing because I bought probably 18 or 20 add-ons in my career, just in terms of integrating them. And you always get something that happens when you buy a company. They come in, they give you sales projections so that you can pay a lot for them, right? And then what happens in the market is you buy them, and then people are like, oh my gosh, they just got bought. We don't know what's going to happen. And everybody waits a couple quarters to see what's going to happen. And, you never hit your sales projections. And the Soluno team literally doubled their sales projections that first year. It was nuts how much growth they fueled. And so just being able to, incorporate that team and that product in and get our teams integrated and working together, I think that I'm pretty proud of that effort. It was a lot of work, and it was hard. It would have been easy to say no, but it's been really, really influential, really help our North American market and then beyond too.
That's awesome to hear. And when we're thinking about the Actionstep product, is there any principles that you kind of think about when building Actionstep that helps guide your decisions? And I think that kind of touches on what you said then about deciding whether you build something or you might have an opportunity to acquire this company and add it in.
Yeah, I guess you would answer that question specifically by opportunity, but fundamentally, I think of Actionstep as a really powerful tool that you can really use in any law firm with any practice area and automate it and get repeatability. It helps you manage at the firm level, like make your firm really well run, not just a lawyer being able to bill and be really productive, but the whole firm overall. And so I think of the product as the important thing is that we provide tools for the consultants and partner communities to do what I call last mile work. So you implement it, and in addition, we have firms that do that work internally, and they will, they'll use the API and they'll build add-on things because every law firm has their own unique thing that makes them, their own secret sauce. And for us to be able to plug into that, and maybe fundamentally, one of the things that we've been pretty good at is we can get people live quickly, especially relative to most of the competition, and just to make sure that we adhere to that. It's important that you can do your conversion and get it implemented, and you're not waiting on Actionstep to build new features, and you can go live and get the value as quick as possible. Those are kind of the fundamental things I think about.
Yeah, and when we look into the future of Actionstep, what should we expect? Do you think Actionstep's going to dive deeper in its core expertise currently, or expand in more areas, or rely on integrations for that?
I think we'll do a little bit of all of that. There's no one company that can own all pieces of everything in legal tech. There's so many practice areas and specialties. So, our investment continues to be able to harden our public API so that we can do more integrations and we can do them better and faster. But we are the system of record. We want to be that system of record, and we believe really strongly that you need both the back office and the front office. You need legal, accounting, and billing and trust. All that core stuff to run the firm. You can't really practice law without it, but you can't be a top performer without the really robust practice management and workflow and all the tools that we bring to the table. And so that's our core, is that system of record. And where we draw the lines, that whether we add on, some modules or we partner, those are just, if there's a solution out there, for the sake of the customers, you can partner, and it's in the market today. So those decisions, we're going to focus on our core. We want our firms to be really ready and able to leverage AI, because it really gets powerful if you have a full database that your firm is using and it's all comprehensive and all out there. Then you have the data that you need for AI to really be successful. And it's more than just Gen AI. It's other sorts of AI and machine learning as well that can really, really help firms benefit.
Yeah, talking more about that. So machine learning, Gen AI, where do you really see that going for law firms in the next few years?
I'm not going to predict the minutia because I'll probably be wrong. I just think it comes back to what we said earlier. We're gonna get the affordability of legal services to a better place for their clients. That's what I think the mission of it is.
Yeah.
How that happens and what little point solutions, I think there's a lot to uncover still there. We just want to make sure our platform can go and in that direction and support all that, and that's really what our focus is.
And this is a bit of a fun one. If difficulty wasn't a consideration and you had unlimited resources and time and you could instantly add a new feature or module to Actionstep, what would you add?
That's a tough question.
Should have given you some more thinking time.
Well, I mean, I would just do the magic, button where I could sort of, I could really take a law firm and have them automatically sort of adjudicate a case, like all the work around it almost instantly, and then you meet with a lawyer for 15 minutes. It's done. And all the automation's there, all the checks and balances are there, and I can do something for 10% or 5% the cost. I mean, that's the magic bullet feature. There's no magic bullet feature there. That's going to be a lot of work to get there, but
maybe in like 10 years.
Yeah, that's the magic. That's the main way.
And so looking ahead, what do you think the biggest opportunity is for Actionstep in the next few years that you're excited about?
Well, it's really doubling down on our growth in North America and the UK. I mean, that's really the main opportunity. That said, I don't really want to discount Australia, New Zealand, because we have a tremendous amount of value we can add to the customers. We have so many customers here, and that's where you're talking about some of the integrations and things that we can do to make the customers, even better and even more functional. But I'm really looking forward to, in the U.S., this changing market, this maturing market, and all the sort of moving parts. It's going to come down to just a few main players in the area that we're in that are going to come, be in the fray for the long run. And I'm confident we'll be one of them. And I'm excited to work on making sure that we're in the top position in our sort of space, which is mid-market, is how we like to talk about it.
Very excited to see that happen. Hopefully VXT is used alongside Actionstep everywhere.
100%. And
so to finish off with the hard-hitting questions, you're stuck on a deserted island. What's the one thing you're going to take with you?
All right, you're going to think this is a suck-up answer, but I would take my wife.
Aw, that's so nice.
Come on now.
Yeah, you wouldn't want to take something that you can't you want to take a person. Right?
I'd go nuts if I if I couldn't talk to her, because I'd be talking to myself. They'd find me a crazy person. I'd be like Tom Hanks and what do you have, that Wilson basketball or whatever that was.
Yeah.
Volleyball.
And so looking back at your career, what's one piece of advice you'd give to yourself if you were just starting out?
Yeah, I don't know. That's a good. Don't worry. Do your best and sort of let the chips fall. I think in my early career, I was you kind of are trying to prove yourself over and over and over again, and I'm like, just show up and do your best, and that's it.
Nice. And another very hard-hitting question: what is the favorite app on your phone?
Spotify.
Nice.
Yeah, I'm a music person at heart.
Who's your favorite musician?
Oh, come on now. I don't really have one. I mean, I listen to a lot of different stuff. If I could only ever listen to one person ever the rest of my life, I'd have to be the Beatles.
Nice. I did see your LinkedIn profile picture. You're holding a guitar. Do you play the guitar?
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Any other instruments?
No, not really. I can plunk on a piano, but I would in no way say I can play it. I could learn a song, but at a time. But
nice.
Yeah.
And what is the best piece of advice you've ever received?
Best piece of advice I've ever received. It's kind of a family kind of a thing. I mean, you have you have your kids around. Don't not take advantage of that, because they don't last that long. Yeah. They're out on their own. The amount of times that you have to. I got to fly home tonight and take the red eye because I got a baseball game, or we got to go do this. You got to be able to do that. And I think that's probably my mom's advice. She wrote me a poem about it, or she sent me a poem about it. I'm like, okay, I need my mom meddling, but that was sound advice.
I really like that advice. Great way to finish off the interview as well. So thank you very much, Early. I've loved this conversation. And if people would like to get in contact with you or learn more about Actionstep, how can they do that?
Well, they can go to www.actionstep.com, or, you can find me on LinkedIn or early.stevens@actionstep.com.
Amazing. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.